Good morning and welcome to our employer webinar, an opportunity to hear from and ask questions of those running the People's Pension. If you're saving into our pension scheme, you may be interested in the members webinar on the 28th of February. Details on the website. Thank you to everyone online with us now and those watching on catch up. Thanks to those who have submitted questions already and continue to do so. Please, we will cover as many as possible in the next 45 minutes. But rest assured, if your question isn't picked up live, we will pick it up offline. I'm Greg McClymont, Director of Policy and External Affairs at the People's Pension. Here with me today we have, in the middle, Steve Delo, Chair of Trustees. Good morning, Steve.
Morning.
Roy Porter, Head of Marketing and Sales, and most importantly, Group Director of Sales and Marketing. Good morning, Roy. And David Madison, Trustee Director of the People's Pension.
Good morning.
Good morning, David. Today we'll be covering highlights over the past year and how the trustees have ensured the scheme is well governed. A quick update on Brexit and most importantly answering your questions about workplace pensions and specifically about your People's Pension. Turning first to Steve. Steve, it's been another busy year for the People's Pension. Membership numbers have grown. I want to ask you about that. New trustees have joined the Trustee Board. More on that in a moment. And more widely, I want to ask you about how trustees monitor the People's Pension in the members' interests. Steve, you're chair of the People's Pension Board. Can you give an insight into what you've been covering in the last year and where the scheme currently stands?
Well, morning Greg. It's been an immensely busy year because the scheme has grown rapidly. We now sit at around about 4.1 million members in the scheme. So measured by membership, that makes the People's Pension the largest independent pension fund in the UK. In terms of asset size, we've got in excess of £5 billion invested in the scheme's investments, and we've got well over 80,000 individual employers involved with the scheme. So it is a massive enterprise. The trustees have therefore been rather busy keeping on top of all of this. As you alluded to, we made some changes to the Trustee Board this year. So we have two new trustee directors on the board. The first is Chris Fagan, who joined us last year, who is well known in the pensions industry, an experienced investment consultant who's brought some great new power to the investment side of the board. And David Madison here. David, whose reputation goes before him, done some very big jobs in the industry and knows a lot about the operational side. So I believe we've really strengthened the board, and I continue to be joined on that board by Sue Lewis and Alan Pickering. Sue and Alan have been there for a long time now. They've seen it and they've done it, and I think they're great trustees.
And it needs to be a very strong trustee board, doesn't it, when we think about the sheer size of the scheme now? I mean, more than 4 million members. I mean, that's an enormous number. What is the role of the Independent Trustee Board in relation to the People's Pension Scheme?
Well, ultimately, the buck stops with us. Ours is the responsibility for making sure that everything happens. We don't have to do all the work, but we need to make sure that it does happen. So we're delegating to third parties, but primarily, of course, to the People's Pension Administration team, based in Crawley, that runs all of the operational side extremely well. The Trustee Board is fully independent. I think that is important. It means we've got no vested interests in the success or otherwise of the business aspects here, even though, of course, it's a not-for-profit organisation, which is important. So we make sure that all these many moving parts are working correctly. We do this via a series of formal meetings. We have at least quarterly formal Trustee Board meetings attended by all the trustee directors, various senior people from the People's Pension business and various advisors, at which we keep a really strong hand on the tiller. Then we have some subcommittees that get more into the operational depth. For instance, an investment committee, which Alan Pickering chairs, which gets into the detail of investment and sets the ultimate strategy. And our so-called RAC committee, which David is involved with, which is all about risk and operational compliance, a very important day-to-day operational vehicle for us. So it's all about making sure that everything is working correctly, that we're anticipating the future needs of the scheme as it grows and make sure we're properly resourced to do that.
So the only job of trustees in the end is to ensure the scheme is governed in the interests of our more than 4 million members?
Absolutely. So we're there on members' sides here.
Members' side, full stop. And employers, I assume, can have confidence that their employees, as members of the People's Pension, are having their interests put first at all times.
Well, I think from an employer perspective, investing in any pension fund, putting your members and corporate money into a pension fund, you want to make sure that it's set up correctly and that it's run well and there aren't going to be any nasty surprises. Therefore, the governance of that pension scheme, what the trustees do, has got to be of paramount importance to you. And we put a lot of store by the fact that we've got experienced people on this board working extensively to ensure that the governance is robust across the piece, from investments to admin to communicating to members and to making sure that when members ultimately retire from the scheme, they get a very good experience.
Thank you, Steve. And you mentioned risk a moment ago. Moving on to Brexit, can you just say a little about how the trustees are approaching the issue of Brexit?
I wish I knew the answer to what is going to happen on Brexit. It would make things a lot easier, but I don't think anybody does, be they Michel Barnier or the Prime Minister or Jacob Rees-Mogg, whoever it may be. What I do know is this is an unprecedented situation with a raft of different scenarios that could actually play out in practice, probably in the coming weeks. Therefore, the most important thing is to make sure that risk is properly diversified within the pension fund. We've been increasingly diversifying the scheme over the last year, investing in lots of new areas to make sure, essentially, we don't have all our eggs in one basket. So by doing this, I think we can make ourselves resilient in whatever Brexit outcome we get to see.
Thank you, Steve. And in terms of employers and the approach of the Trustee Board as the governors of the scheme in the end, how do you think about making it easy for employers, to engage with the people's pension? What do we do to make it straightforward for employers?
Well, from the off, when this scheme was launched at the outset of auto-enrolment many years ago, the vision has always been to make this a very straightforward process for employers. Now, if you think about it, we've got 80,000 plus employers here. They've got to be able to deal with us in an efficient way. So we've set up a structure that involves online sign-up, an online toolkit that enables employers throughout their duration with the scheme to do their job properly and understand what they need to do, and a very, very effective helpline to ensure that anybody who gets into trouble or gets confused as an employer has got somewhere to go to speak to someone. I've had the good fortune in my role as trustee periodically to sit down with frontline people's pension team members on the phones, listening to them helping employers. And they genuinely do handhold in an extremely effective way, helping employers to understand what they've got to do, their end, to make it work our end. The strength of the interface between the scheme and the employer is absolutely critical. And if you look at our 80,000 employer base, most of those employers are getting those contributions across that they deduct monthly very, very efficiently.
Thank you, Steve. Roy, central to what the People's Pension has been thinking about in the last year is the process of Master Trust authorisation. Can you say a little about what Master Trust authorisation is? Because it won't be clear to lots of people watching. Why it has been put into place by the government and why the People's Pension is very well placed to respond to the new demands of the new regulatory regime.
Yeah, so I guess the reasons why the government are bringing in greater security is because anybody can set up a master trust up until quite recently. So they're bringing in some rigour, some more governance to the approach. And I guess the regulation that's coming through is all about security. So it's all about systems, ensuring that you've got the right systems and processes in place, that you've got a good continuity strategy in place, that financial support and sustainability is built in to the scheme. And essentially, from our perspective, given our scale and the structure that we have, we're very well placed. So there's a lot of work going on, or has been going on, over the last 6 months to ensure that we've got the right information ready for the regulator. We've taken a pragmatic approach to it. We have taken advice from auditors, from lawyers, from covenant specialists, to ensure that as we make our submission, it's as robust as it possibly can be. So we will be submitting our authorisation application to the regulator within the next couple of weeks. But it's been a very long process.
Thank you, Roy. And this is a really big thing, isn't it? Bringing the panel more generally. Master Trust authorisation, as Roy has suggested, is taking auto-enrolment pensions from a situation where essentially anyone could set up a scheme to a situation where there are very strict regulations and safeguards around the security of members' money. My understanding is one of those safeguards, Roy, is around the reserve capital that must be held in place by a scheme in the unfortunate event that a scheme would have to wind up, then to ensure that members' money is safe.
Yeah.
Is that right? That's
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, yes. So the regulator is bringing in solvency requirements to all intents and purposes as part of that continuity strategy, and it's similar to what other pension schemes have done in the past. Now, what that is causing, of course, is a little bit of consolidation in the market. The pensions regulator has told us that they think there's about 90 master trusts out there. We know that 8 have already applied for authorisation. 7 have exited the market already, and in fact, last year when we carried out this trustee webinar, I mentioned that we were taking on one organisation. We took on Your Workplace Pension, which has been the largest master trust consolidation to date. About 20 million assets came across into the People's Pension Scheme. And we're very well placed to work with that. But I should mention to employers that we're not just taking anything that comes at us. We are looking at things in a great deal of detail, ensuring that we go through the right due diligence process, and we will only take on other schemes if it's in our members' best interests.
Thank you, Roy. So essentially, Master Trust Authorisation is professionalising the Master Trust market. Our size and strength as the largest independent Master Trust in the market means we are very well placed to provide that extra security to our members, and also if the regulations prove too onerous for smaller schemes, we're in a good position to take on those assets if it's right for our members.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way to put it, Steve?
I'll just quickly take that. I mean, I think Master Trust authorisation is absolutely necessary. It's coming at the right time. It's a lot of work for everybody, but it's coming at the right time, and it will give employers a huge amount of reassurance that if you like, they're backing the right organisation to look after the long-term futures of their employees, and members of the scheme. They will have that reassurance. So I think it is well timed. The emphasis is on the right sort of things, making sure that Master Trusts have robust processes to deal with the volume, making sure, as Roy said, that there's the capital behind it, so that if anything goes wrong, members' pots don't get affected. That's the most important thing. And then, as we push forward, there is more contributions going in under auto-enrolment. This will help the government develop future policy, knowing it's got a raft of Master Trusts out there that are doing the job well.
And I'm going to come to David next in a minute on those increased contributions, but I just want to ask the panel generally an example of a process. So Master Trust authorisation is ensuring that processes are properly put in place to deliver. What kind of processes, can you give us a sense of the task which a scheme with 80,000 employers, say, faces in processing? What would be an example of like a process which is critical to this?
Well, the most critical process, in my view, is getting money across. So you've got 80,000 different employers that are deducting contributions from members' salaries, and they're paying across their own contributions as well. Those have got to get from the employer to the scheme quickly, with tight regulatory deadlines. Not everyone does it, and employers need to sharpen up. If there's any employers watching who've been sitting on their pension contributions for a few months, please don't. It's not a good idea. But it's all about getting them across in a timely way, and then having the processes to make sure that the moment it's hitting bank accounts, it's moving across efficiently into the underlying investments. Probably talk a little bit about it later, but we remodel our investment interfaces to make everything as efficient as possible going forward.
And there have been examples of Master Trusts that have failed to get contributions processed in time for all their members, because it can be tricky, but the People's Pension has always managed to do it correctly.
If you get behind with it, you can build up a backlog with contributions, it can finish an organisation off. So you've got to be very disciplined and organised. And what does that mean for an organisation like the People's Pension? It means that you absolutely have to be well resourced. And the business has always resourced the administration ahead of demand. And that, I think, has been critical to our success. We've had many awards over the years for what we've been doing. For example, this year, in a major customer service award, the People's Pension was named as one of the 10 best in the country. This isn't just pensions, this is in any business in the country of dealing with customers. That's because our processes are robust, we've got good people doing the work, and we're resourcing properly.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to come to David in a moment as promised, but I've got a question coming in from our audience, which is for anyone who wants to take it from the panel. Can my employees transfer other pensions into the People's Pension?
Well, for Roy, I think.
Yeah, so generally, yes. There's certain criteria they need to meet, but generally, yes. And they can do that in a number of different ways. If they go online, they can use our online services. Alternatively, they can download a form, complete that, and send it through to us, and we'll take on the exercise for them. We're seeing actually quite a lot of people now consolidating, typically as they get towards retirement, but also people move around quite a bit, and having lots and lots of small pots isn't great. So many people do tend to pull them all together, and yes, we're experiencing quite a lot of that. So yeah, absolutely you can. So money purchase to money purchase, definitely. If you're looking at a final salary transfer, there's a bit more to it, and typically you need to take advice.
So we're open for business is the answer.
Yes,
Thank you very much. David, Steve mentioned the forthcoming rise in contributions. We know that in April 2019, contributions will go in total from 5 to 8%, which is a big increase. Can you just explain what's happening, what the background to this increase is, and how we support employers with this change in contributions?
Yeah, certainly, Greg. I suppose the headline 3% does sound a big jump from the 5%. However, when you break it down, 1% for employers and 2% for members. I guess our job at the People's Pension is to make sure that employers remain compliant and get the right amount across. But just by way of background, this is the last of the 3 planned increases to the auto enrolment increased contribution levels. And from an employer perspective, it went up 2% to 2% last year, and it's gone up to 3% this year. So just to be clear, whilst the headline sounds great, it's 1% for employers. Now, what have the People's Pension been doing? We've been trying to get the balance right since probably last July, when I first joined, actually, the start of the campaign to give support to employers. We've got an online toolkit, another one that Steve mentioned earlier, specifically around this. We've got template letters that has been our #1 download for employers to use with their employees. We've got posters that can download for the workplace. There's even online, there's a great little, I think it's 2 or 3 minute video, which is aimed at employees, but it's well worth a watch for anybody, I reckon. Again, just to say, our main ethos is to make doing business with us easy. Within members' online services account, we've got prompts and alerts. The idea is we want to help employers every step of the way. Again, just sort of expanding on your points, Greg, it probably is worth mentioning that whilst the 3% headline does sound great, but as I've explained, it's 2 and 1. Last time we had an increase last year, there was a bit of a worry that a lot of savers might drop out because of the increase. However, figures released by the PLSA, that's Pension Lifetime Savings Association, was that only 0.2% increase in people opting out of the pension scheme as a result of the increased contributions.
And that was across the 3 biggest schemes, including ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It was Nest, Now Pensions, and us, the People's Pension. So that was encouraging from an overall pension saving perspective.
Thank you, David. And am I right in saying that for most of our employer customers, we will handle this change on their behalf, Roy?
Yeah, so many of them will have experienced this last year, but we're taking the pain out of the increase. Effectively, if employers are operating on the qualifying earnings basis, so the kind of default position that the government brought in, minimum contributions, then they need do nothing. We will, from a systems perspective, we will make the increases from April for them. If they're paying more, then they'll need to check to make sure that they're within the guidelines being set out as minimum payments. But yeah, we're taking the pain out of it for them.
And just so our employer audience is clear, the government set in place in legislation when auto-enrolment was brought in these staging increases. So this is government legislation, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Over 3 periods, contributions increase to 8%. And we are as our employer customers pension scheme, we're making that government imposed increase as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And it goes to 8%, and that should be broadly good news because, of course, contributions need to be of a reasonable size to ensure that people get, at the end of their working life, a reasonable size of pension pot. So I think generally we would see this broadly as the government's move to increase contributions slowly as being the right way to proceed. Would that be fair?
I think if you'd gone for a cliff edge move to 8% at outset, it would have been a wholly different place we'd be in today, quite frankly. And I think the phasing in has worked. There was a bit of nervousness in the pensions world last year when the first increase occurred. I think it's been, as we've discussed, generally been well absorbed. Feedback seems to be strong at the moment. So I think people are getting used to it now, and the pace of change has been right. And now it's at a more meaningful level. So I'm encouraged. I know within the People's Pension we're very supportive of all of this.
And that meaningful is very important because 8% contributions gives people the opportunity really to get potentially to a reasonable retirement pot by the end of their working life.
If an individual can afford more, by all means start to bolster your pot more. We're not saying stop there, but it's now got to a level that can do something.
And some employers do, as Roy intimated, do contribute more than the basic minimum.
But lots do, yeah.
So statutory minimum's going up to 8%. Employers and individuals can do more if they wish to.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Steve, investments. We're talking about contributions leading to pension pots by the time people come to retire or reach age of 55. Clearly investment returns, the return gained on the money placed in the pension pot via contributions is absolutely critical. Can you give our audience a sense of the approach to investment that the People's Pension is taking and steps we've taken down that path in the last 12 months since the last webinar?
Well, it's been an evolutionary strategy since the outset of the scheme. This scheme started with no members and no assets, and then it's grown rapidly. Average pots are increasing. I think, Roy, what about 1.3k now, £1,300?
Yeah, about £1,300
is roughly the average member pot at this point in time. So it's still very modest in the overall scheme of things. So we've had time to properly think about the investment strategy. So we started off in one direction and have evolved and modified it over time. We made various modifications
Hold the
last
press,
year.
Steve, sorry to interrupt. A very important question just come in. Try to stop you in full flow, but I think this is worth absolutely taking this question before we move on. For employees that do opt out of auto-enrolment, do they have an opportunity to re-enroll?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in fact, their employer will have to re-enroll them every 3 years. So they have the opportunity at the discretion of the employer during that sort of triennial period. But at the end of the 3 years, they will be automatically re-enrolled again. So they will have to, if they want to opt out, they can opt out at that point. So yes, it happens.
And a follow-up question to that, thank you, Roy. As an employer, we pay 10% of the employee's salary. So therefore, I assume we don't have to do anything in April for the increases.
I think they'd need to check. It depends, because we're talking about 8% of a qualifying band of earnings. And if it's 10% of total salary, probably most people would be covered, but it's worth just checking.
And can our employee customer check with the People's Pension?
Yes, we do that for you, yeah.
We'll be delighted to help with that. Thank you very much. Now, Steve, apologies for stopping you in full flow. The Chair's profuse apologies. You were just starting to set out how we're approaching the crucial issue of investing our members' contributions for a long-term return.
Right. I'll press the pause button, unpause it. I was worried there something had happened on Brexit.
Things don't happen that quickly on Brexit, Steve. We know that by now.
So yes, at the end of the day, we have been evolving the investment strategy to meet the needs of the scheme. We've now beefed up our way of doing things because we've brought on board a Chief Investment Officer within the People's Pension, Nico Aspinall, to lead the initiative. Nico joined us in 2017, and he's been building his team over the last year to make sure that we're fully equipped for the needs of the scheme as we change over time. So at the moment, we're at around about 5 billion. At the current rate, we're going to get it to 10 billion fairly quickly.
How quickly? I know these things are projections.
Handful of years, I mean, if that.
Because £5 billion is a lot of money.
£5 billion is a lot of money. It still makes it a very large pension fund. But we're looking at a scheme that's going to get to £20 billion within a fairly reasonable time frame. And we've got to start getting in place all the building blocks to be investing that sum of money. So we've been increasing the diversification in the investment strategy over the last year, investing into some new areas. So widening the opportunity set.
So I'm going to stop you there because
we're never going to get through this.
That's the sort of jargon which, of course, we're all very well known for in the investment industry. Widening the opportunity set. I think we've got employers listening. What do we mean by that in brass tacks?
What we mean is we're looking at a whole different set of investments. So when the scheme started, we were looking conventionally at mainstream equities and at bonds and gilts, bonds issued by the UK government in the main. We've now started looking at wider things, so widening the opportunity set into investments such as infrastructure, such as different ways of managing equity, other asset classes, other ways of doing things that will deliver returns that should be good in the fullness of time, but might behave differently in the short term. So you literally are ensuring you don't have all your eggs in one basket by doing that. And that, I think, is incumbent upon us as a trustee board to be thinking that widely. But to do it, you've got to have the people in place. For instance, we've made two important appointments recently. David Sack joined us as head of asset allocation, another bit of jargon for you. But essentially, he's the man who's coming in to look at all the different investment opportunities out there and come to the trustee board and the investment committee and say, well, these are the things I think we should start to include. Very impressive individual. He did a very long presentation at last week's investment committee that I think got us all thinking. And Daniel Coombs has joined us to focus on responsible investment. That's becoming ever more important, making sure that how we invest, we're doing it in a responsible way, that we're cognizant of environmental issues and governance issues within companies that we might invest in so that we're well placed for the future. And that's the next evolution of where we're going. One practical change we've made is we've changed the custodian structure for the scheme, another bit of jargon, and it's something that employers don't need to worry about. It's a bit like us tinkering with the engine of the car. Employers don't need to look under the bonnet, we do, and what we've been doing is making changes to the engine, tuning it up, souping it up, making it more dynamic and more flexible so that as the scheme grows we can do more and we can do it more efficiently, and that the interface between members and the scheme can be as efficient as possible.
So as a trustee board, your duty, your legal duty is to act in the members' interests. You're doing this in investment as we look towards diversifying to ensure that we have a wider range of investments, not just investing in company shares and in company and government bonds. That might involve things like investing in airports, ownership in airports, for example.
Potentially,
would that be an example of infrastructure? Or the M6 toll road or whatever. And is the idea to provide long-term, stable returns?
Yeah, I mean, what we're looking for is good returns, hopefully predictable returns, ones that will be around for a long time. So this pension fund is going to be around for a very long time. So we don't have to worry about saying, well, we need to encash that investment in the next year or the next 2 years. We can think 10, 20, 30 years ahead and therefore invest in the very best opportunities that are out there. Again, scale becomes important. To invest properly in this stuff, you need to have a decent amount of assets to do it to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, the trading costs of doing it are too high. Once you're into the multiple billions and the tens of billions, you do more and more of this stuff.
Thank you. So we're taking a more diversified approach over time to try and provide a more predictable series of returns, but good returns.
Good returns with a less bumpy ride is ultimately what you're aiming for.
Perfectly put, no jargon there. Thank you, Steve. David, pension freedoms, a very big moment in pensions policy and pension legislation from 2015. No longer necessary, de facto necessary to buy an annuity at retirement. Can now do as one wishes with one's retirement income subject to taxation. How has the People's Pension approached the issue of pension freedoms and adapted our approach as a scheme at retirement? And what do you think our members are looking for? Are they looking for a helping hand?
Okay. Quite a broad question there, Greg. I'll do my best to cover it all. I guess there's no doubt all our research and research in the industry shows that members are looking for help at retirement. It's incredibly complicated. They don't know quite what to do. We want to make sure they know where to go for guidance and advice. Now, I guess by taking guidance and advice, ultimately we're hoping that members will get more for their money, and that's got to be important. Guidance, I guess, you can get free. You can get it from a company called PensionsWise. Actually, it's a government-sponsored initiative, and we tend to point members that way on our website. It's pretty good. You can get online advice face-to-face or by telephone. It does give you the basics, but it won't give you specific recommendations for you. This is the crossover between guidance and advice. And I guess some employers out there, they may have links with some advisors, which may help their employees. But on our website, we've got online calculators. We've got some good information again. You know, coming back to what Steve said earlier, we're doing our absolute best to provide as much help for our members, and of course, employers can have a look at that. We've also teamed up with LV, a retirement specialist, and they give some online guidance and some sort of low-cost advice. However, that doesn't stop if members feel there is a need for special advice or independent advice, then they should go for that. And again, you know, we seem to be full of caveats, but we would recommend that people go to unbiased.com or the Money Service to see, just to make sure any advisor they're using is truly independent or fits their needs.
David, am I right in saying that because we have a new scheme and contributions so far have been low, the members we have that are coming to retirement generally have small pots and are unlikely at this stage to seek advice? But we are thinking to the longer term as the pots grow. Absolutely.
We've got to deal with both, and so guidance might be best for the members you reference with smaller pots, but definitely, Steve said, we're a long-term outfit here. We're looking across the long term, so we need to plan for that. I guess, if I may, communications are absolutely key, and one of my key jobs, I'm chairman of the Risk, Admin and Communications Committee, and what we do is we try and put ourselves in the shoes of members when we're signing off communications, because you know we feel it's really important that if we get it, you know, we really do try and make sure that we get it so that when it's on the web, members can get it. So again, I think it's all about making sure that at every step, you mentioned the longevity again, at every step of a member's retirement journey, we want them to get the right information, and I guess we look to our employers to help us to do that.
And am I right in saying that my sense is that People's Pension spends a lot of time trying to get communications as simple as possible to make them explicable? Because that's something one notices. You know, if you ask someone in the street, they will say pension's very complicated, I don't understand it. Can we not make it simpler? People's Pension invests a lot of time and effort into...
Absolutely. It's one of the things that attracted me to be honest, because keeping it simple for members is absolutely crucial.
And Roy, is that reflected in the development of our website? If we think we move towards things we are doing with an eye to the future from a development of new services and products point of view, our website, has that developed in the last 12 months?
Yeah, absolutely. So we like to keep things simple, straightforward and understandable, most importantly. So yeah, you mentioned the website. As far as proposition development is concerned, we're doing a lot behind the scenes at the moment, an awful lot. Some of the things that employers and members may have seen is changes to the website. We went through a complete architectural overhaul of the People's Pension website during the year, reduced the number of pages very significantly to make it easier for people to navigate and to find what they needed to find, essentially. All of our proposition development, though, is based on a lot of evidence and research that we carry out with our membership and others. And as far as the retirement piece is concerned, the sort of thing that David was talking about, the research seems to indicate that people want a predictable yet flexible retirement income. Now, we've talked about low levels of average fund value, but I see the statistics that come through every week on the number of transfers that are coming into the scheme. And pretty much every day there will be a transfer value of over £100,000 coming to us. So whilst we have a lot of small pots, we also have some considerable size pots coming through. And so it's important that we do develop our retirement proposition to cater for those people, and we are doing so. We're very cognizant of the FCA retirement outcomes review, where the review is trying to ensure that consumers get a better outcome. And generally, we agree with what's being said there. We think the movement towards guided pathways is the right one. We think that that's a step in the right direction, but it's not.
What's
everything.
a guided pathway, Roy?
So this is when somebody, most of our members, 99% of them are in our default fund. Most of them will go into a process where their investment assets will move from primarily equities into more gilts and bonds as they approach retirement.
To reduce the risk of the pot size dropping significantly?
Yeah, to take the volatility out and so on. But when people get to retirement, they need help and support. And what the sort of thing that Dave was saying. So what the FCA are suggesting is that pension providers should have some guided pathways for people to follow. So
essentially 3 options to choose from.
Yeah, I think it's 4 actually. I think it's 4 that they're looking at. But yes, 4 simple options which have certain product sets that sit above them with the right underlying investment solution to support it. So we're looking at developing that side of things.
And am I right in saying we're not regulated by the FCA, we're regulated by the TPR? Yeah. And am I right in saying that the work that we are doing to try and work out how to offer our members this combination of predictability and flexibility is driven by the Trustee Board's review, asking the People's Pension as an organisation to work in this because you think it's central to our members' interest to have this option? Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, and I think that members need to be able to move forward with their decision making. Often they can get a little bit blocked because they don't know where to turn. But in reality, quite a lot of people will fit into these sort of 4 pathways potentially. And therefore it's important that this starts to move forward. We're very supportive of it. And everything we do on the People's Pension Trustee Board is about trying to make this journey that much easier for members. I mean, David and Sue Lewis on the RAT committee, I've seen them both in action. They will challenge every bit of communication to make sure that members can actually understand it. They sit there looking at it through members' eyes, if you like. So we're wholly supportive of anything that makes this journey easier and cost effective as well, because we don't want members having to pay ludicrous amounts for advice that leads them nowhere. And
that's a big challenge, isn't it? It's not just the cost of advice at retirement, it's also potentially products out there that are very expensive and don't deliver value for money. In fact, a question coming in right now for the panel: can members leave their pension pot with the People's Pension when they retire? Also, can they have stages of drawdown from the scheme after retirement?
Yeah, I can pick that up. The answer is, quick answer is yes, they can, so that they're able to actually take their money in the way that they want to effectively. So there is a flexible drawdown facility within the scheme. We are developing that. At the moment, it's a vehicle to take the tax-free cash, as it were, out, and then to take chunks of money out afterwards. You can leave the money invested for as long as you want to. In the future, we will look to develop that so that it is a more sophisticated regular income facility.
And that's what we're working on developing.
Yeah.
Sorry, Greg, I mean, again, this all plays to size here. So at the moment, we have average pot sizes that are modest, this £1,000, £1,500 sort of level. These grow as this scheme grows. The pots will get bigger and bigger. As they get bigger and bigger, the flexibilities that members are likely to want to exercise will come into play. So we're building all of this, again, in anticipation of the demand as the scheme grows.
Thank you. See, that's very useful clarification. There's lots of questions coming in, so let me fire these at the panel. Is there anywhere at People's Pension that we can direct our employees so that they fully understand all the ramifications of taking money out of their pots?
Okay, so as people approach retirement, we have a communication programme. Well, in fact, we know that there's been a recent consultation on improving the communication that goes through to members. So the answer is that yes, we send out information on the options that are available to members. There's a specific part of our website as well that provides guidance on this, and they can further go on to a free report which enables them to understand the the types of ways in which they can take their money out of the scheme, and potentially how long it might last for.
And do we provide support if someone calls us up? Do we provide support as well?
We can provide guidance, but limited guidance at the moment. As David said, what we tend to do is we hand people off to PensionsWise, to their own advisor. We suggest that they get advice, or they can use the digital advice process through LV. But it's important that people get the right level of guidance and advice at retirement.
And PensionsWise is the government regulated and set up by the government body to provide that sort of guidance on an impartial basis.
Yeah.
So we'll suggesting, amongst other things, that people go and access that service. Another question coming in: I get a lot of questions from my employees asking if the people's pension collapse. First, is the pension secure? And second, will employees get their money back? This takes us back to the Master Trust authorisation question, I think. Can we just clarify?
Firstly, the big reassurance here, this is a pension fund that is set up under trust. That's why you've got trustees, like me and David. Why is it set up under trust? It's set up under trust to keep the assets separate from the employers that are involved with it, and indeed from the People's Pension Organisation that is sponsoring it. And our job of trustees is to keep that absolutely secure. So Master Trust authorisation is going a stage further and saying, well, we want to make sure, it's the government saying this, we want to make sure that if there was a corporate collapse of an organisation running a Master Trust, that members' pots don't have to be used to essentially wind that arrangement up. So everything that's happening on Master Trust authorisation at the moment is leading to a place where members of an authorised Master Trust can have a great deal of confidence that that scenario cannot play out. And now, given the scale of the People's Pension, the enormous resource applied to it, the resources, including considerable capital, sitting within the sponsoring organisation, I'm very comfortable that this is an extremely secure solution for employers to use.
Thank you, Steve. Questions, keep firing them at you because we're getting short of time and they keep coming. Another question from an employer: will people know who have been approved as Master Trusts following authorisation? This could be useful if people have small pension pots that are not one of the approved Master Trusts and want to transfer. Who wants to take that question?
Well, yes, I think there's going to be an announcement of it. I don't think there's going to be a big TV programme announcing it to the nation, but there will be announcements from the regulator.
A version of Britain's Got Pensions, not
That's
Britain's
right.
Got Talent.
Actually, just if I can come in there, it's a shame that we don't know those that are going through authorisation and those that aren't. But clearly there are confidentialities and commercial interests at heart here. Now, having said that, we understand that the regulator will make announcements around about September on those that have been successful with their authorisation. As I say, there are a number that we know already that have exited the market. Unfortunately, of the 30 or so that have told the pensions regulator that they are probably going to exit the market, all that we can do is have confidential conversations with them, but we can't publish or give out any names because it would breach confidentiality agreements.
Thank you, Roy. And of course, if a scheme doesn't pass authorisation, then of course the monies have to move to an approved scheme.
Well, the trustees have got to take action. So if this authorisation process results in a Master Trust not being authorised, then there are some tightly prescribed actions trustees have to take over periods of days to start the process of securing benefits. So I think the apparatus is there to ensure things.
Thank you, Steve. We're running out of time and the questions keep coming. Let me ask you another. There's been lots of questions about contributions this morning, so we will provide a Q&A afterwards to deal with contributions more widely for our audience. But a question that's just come in: if an employee opts out when the next increase takes place, can an employer choose to continue their own 3% contributions to that employee's fund?
So they can with us. So if you're with the People's Pension, you are able to do that, but you need to be aware that because that individual will not be fulfilling the minimum contributions for automatic enrolment, they will have to be go through a process where they're, to all intents and purposes, re-enrolled at the minimum contribution level at the triennial point. So yes, they can opt out or they can lower their contribution effectively, But that doesn't mean that they're off the hook as such. They will be re-enrolled to all intents and purposes. I mean, I know they're already in the scheme, but that they will be up, if you like, the contribution levels will be increased to the minimum at the re-enrolment date.
They're in and out at the same time.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Okay, and we offer that flexibility.
So not many schemes do that.
Yes,
but we do.
We do. So thank you for that, Roy. We'll get very short of time. I've got another question that's come in from an employer. As a company with over 100 staff, do we need to consult a pension advisor every year to ensure we are doing the correct thing for our employees?
I think that's a matter of choice. Organisations typically with that number of employees do take some form of advice, and as organisations of that size start to, if you like, increase their governance approach, then yes, they do tend to take a third party steer on things. Thank
you, Roy. Now, as we think about these, if an employee opts out, and we took the issue of just a moment ago, if an employee opts out, then employers potentially can continue with their own, with their own contributions. More widely, what do we see as the big challenges? So we've got master trust authorisation, we have a market in flux. Any predictions about where we think the market's going to go next?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, the next couple of years is really to focus on our existing employers and to make sure that we develop the right propositions and services and support for those employers. We want to keep what we've got. Retention is very important to us because clearly we are in a consolidation market, and I suspect that over the course of the next few years we will start to acquire other schemes to bolster our membership.
I guess from the trustees' perspective, I agree. With the consolidation, we're key to make sure that we keep providing top quality service to our employers on this webinar and obviously to our members as well. So it'll be carefully controlled. I think Roy said earlier, we won't take any business unless it's in the best interest of the people's pension.
Yeah, a bit of jargon that we haven't used this morning is value for members, something that trustees are obliged to look at. The market now is all about improving value for members in lots of areas, and I think this is all about diversifying more, negotiating more to get costs down and make things more efficient, controlling all the operational moving parts and enhancing flexibility. That's where we're going with this scheme.
Thanks very much, Steve. So we're out of time. I want to thank the panel. I want to thank our audience. We've been inundated with questions. We will follow these up individually as we undertook to do. Please fill in the feedback survey. Thank you for joining us. We've enjoyed it. We hope you have too. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.